Hello dear YouTubers, dear spectators, this is Atilla Yeşilade dropping another video within 7 days. Miracles do happen in Turkey. I want to thank once again my collaborators, Mesele Ekonomi, the premier economics and finance channel of Turkey, and you are at Real Turkey channel. Today we're going to talk about Turkey's upcoming municipal elections, which are going to be held at the end of March 2024. And I'm not going to talk about election results. I'm going to talk about the importance of these elections and how it might affect economic policy and Turkish diplomacy. These, dear viewers, sadly, may be the last free election Turkey will ever hold. As long as Mr. Erdogan is alive, may he live for 10,000 years. Let me give you the context. If you watch my videos, you would remember that I predicted the opposition would win Turkey's dual elections in May for the parliament and for the presidency. I was bitterly wrong, but I essentially channeled the polls and poll averages, and they all ate humble pie. Thus, AKP and MHP, Mr. Erdogan's party and his nationalist ally, have a majority in the Grand Assembly, and Mr. Erdogan was elected for president for another 5 years. Mr. Erdogan is an authoritarian, not to say a dictator. I think he's sort of like, there is a gray line between authoritarian and dictator, and he is really at the end of that line. And it's very clear from what he is trying to do currently that he wants to be re-elected forever, as long as God gives him, or gods and goddesses give him life. In fact, the topical debate in Turkey nowadays is to amend the constitution to relax the rules for presidential elections, but at the end, everyone agrees, all the experts, that what actually Mr. Erdogan wants to do is, this is his last term, to write a new constitution which would grant him a new term. And I think if the opposition loses in March, I don't think there would be anybody who votes for them who would have any belief in the electoral system. Already we have seen a lot of opposition voters losing complete interest in politics. Apathy has replaced hope, because for one reason or other they realize that, no matter what they do, they can't beat Mr. Erdogan's advantages. After the local elections in March, Turkey will have an election-free period for 4 years, during which, assuming he recaptured the big cities, Mr. Erdogan will clear all the barriers to his authoritarian presidency. He has already consolidated quite a bit of the state apparatus and civil service and even the courts under his personage. And I think at the end of this 4 years, if the opposition loses in March local elections, Turkey will become very much like Putin's Russia, where elections are held, very few people bother to vote, and Mr. Putin always wins. And he always finds an excuse to get himself another term. Can he win? Well, of course, polling is kind of convoluted because there are 81 provinces, so 81 big cities. I think all in all, roughly 1,200 or 1,500 municipalities will be contested. Well, Mr. Erdogan is going to ally with MHP once again, and between the two of them, they hold 50% of the vote. All things being equal, Erdogan and his ally Bahçeli stand a good chance of recapturing major cities that you may recall, like Istanbul, Ankara, Izmir, Antalya, Bodrum, Mersin, back from CHP. Of course, there are caveats. The first caveat is the opposition getting its act together. The main opposition party, CHP, has a new leader, and a new broom always sweeps cleaner. Some of its mayors are popular, but the alliance, the coalition that brought CHP mayors to power in 2019 is no longer there. That coalition had the centrist, center-right İYİ party, which itself is splintering, and its leader, Ms. Meral Akşener, is certainly in no mood to cast her fate, or her party's fate, once more with CHP. No matter how popular Istanbul, Ankara, and Izmir mayors may be, their chance of winning against the combined force of AKP and MHP voters is slim. But as I've said, the main subject of this video is not forecasting election results, which are 5 months hence, but to explain what might happen afterwards. Let's start with the diplomacy. I think Mr. Erdogan has two options when it comes to diplomacy. First, since there is no more opposition, he may drop most of his pretentious policies, such as supporting Hamas unconditionally, or his unholy alliance with Putin, simply because doing so is against the best interests of Turkey. Turkey is economically integrated to the West. We owe the West $212 billion to be paid in a year. 50% of our trade goes to EU. 60-65% goes to OECD countries. Most of our tourists come from Europe and the Western countries. So it's natural for Turkey to mind the relationship with the Western countries. Again, if he has no opposition to tell him that he's doing wrong, because when it comes to foreign policy, the opposition is as populist as Mr. Erdogan. Anti-Americanism runs deep in Turkey and is not related to a certain portion of the political spectrum. People don't like America. People don't like the West in Turkey. So he might become more pragmatic, or he might do exactly the opposite. With the mandate he received from the people, he can defy the West and become a serious problem for NATO. Like how? Again, I dropped a video about that too. Turkish parliament refused to ratify Swedish membership to NATO. This is highly unusual. This reason being, allegedly, Sweden doesn't do enough to expel the terrorists back to Turkey. The problem is, of course, in Turkey, everyone who disagrees with Erdogan is a terrorist. Modern law doesn't work in democratic countries. So this is just a pretext. Mr. Erdogan is very transactionalist, and he is trying to leverage Swedish membership to get F-16s from United States and to get a date for a renewed customs union talks with EU. Also did a video on that. So pragmatism may prevail. And I think, again, if you watch my videos, I really don't have too many kind words for Erdogan. But I think there are things he does because he fervently believes in them, like he's an Islamist. But there are things he does because of political competition from his own base, which is also divided among several smaller parties. So I would say from a diplomacy viewpoint, Erdogan may become a friendlier partner, or a partner that's more predictable with the West. Kind of tragic, isn't it? I mean, we might lose democracy and we might become a better ally with the West. But you gotta remember, the Western ideal of democracy, human rights, equality for all, obviously, in the case of the United States, when it comes to foreign policy, these ideas are usually left aside. And a more pragmatic Erdogan would probably suit United States interests better in terms of its regional focus. But when it comes to EU, an authoritarian Erdogan, no matter how willing he is to compromise and to negotiate, is really not to the liking of EU. EU will consider us a warehouse for Syrian and Afghan refugees, send us a couple of $1 billion, and will not do any other business with us. Economic policy, too, may improve if Mr. Erdogan wins most of the major cities back. So far, he has really surprised me by appointing Mehmet Şimşek, who is a very orthodox economist who used to work for Merrill Lynch and who was the former economy minister after the elections. And Mehmet Şimşek is trying very hard, along with his partner, Ms. Gaye Erkan, at the central bank. Again, if you look at my past videos, I've explained what they're trying to do. They are trying to take Turkey back from really crazy policies like the guy in Argentina is planning to do, back to conventional economic policy, to reduce inflation, to make current account deficits smaller and much easier to finance, to deal with Turkey's structural problems, about which I should drop a video soon. But so far, of course, Turkey has deviated so far from conventional and best practice economic policy that it's simply not feasible to wipe the slate clean and start over. It has to be gradual. Two, of course, 3 months or 4 months before the elections, there is only so much austerity and bitter pill you can impose on the electorate. If Mr. Erdogan wins, I think it's more likely than not that he would give Mr. Mehmet Şimşek and the CBRT head, Ms. Gaye Erkan, a very broad mandate to fix the economy. In that case, I think we will see Turkish interests rise to 50%, perhaps even higher, or perhaps even, if needed, IMF being called to come in and bolster Turkey's depleted FX reserves with a standby program, or at least to increase investor confidence in Turkey. Why would he not do that if he can't get back major cities like Istanbul, Ankara, and Izmir? Simply because that would give hope to the opposition voters and to the world at large that the opposition has a chance to survive. And what the opposition says about the economic policies would matter a lot. Erdogan needs to be more mindful of a strong opposition after the local elections. And of course, the opposition is not going to support the bitter pill kind of economic policy. Whatever Mr. Erdogan does will be met with great skepticism and very loud screams from the opposition. And of course, the constituency may hear that and may not grant Mr. Erdogan the wish to get a third or fourth term. It is really a sad story. Turkish elections have never been fair. There has always been graft. And of course, AKP is financed so much better than the entire opposition, as well as controlling 80% of the media. But they've always been fair. People have reported to the polls by their own free will, and they voted what their hearts desire, more or less. But I think if in March the opposition is defeated without any questions about the viability of the results or the accuracy of the results, Turkey's multi-party democracy era will come to an end. And the really sad part is that may be the best thing economically for the average Turk on the street. Thank you very much for watching our videos. I want to thank Mesele Ekonomi one more time for lending me their production team and equipment. And I hope you'll continue watching me and subscribe if you haven't subscribed by now. This is Atilla Eşala saying goodbye from a sunny Istanbul day.